Hello there guys and welcome, it is Niran here, and today it is time for round number 14 of our F1 2015 Career Mode series here with Carlos Sainz. A few days later than expected, I do apologise for that, obviously making up for the absolute shambles that was last week's Carlos Sainz episode, but the last episode that did count, we were at Italy, where of course Sainz managed to get an incredible podium position in front of the Tifosi in Monza. If you haven't seen the last episode that was meant to be in Singapore, go and check that out, and the rest of this episode may make some sense to you. But today we're in Suzuka for round 14 of the season, and you're seeing pictures from practice where it's looking pretty sunny, but we could have a bit of a rain-affected race. And before we get to see whether it is a rain-affected race, let's have a look at the qualifying report. Saturday would see another gloomy day for McLaren, with gloomy skies up above. 16th and 18th was the best they could manage, with an even more disappointed Romain Grosjean between them. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel was fastest in the session. Q2 saw business as usual for Lewis Hamilton, as he was fastest from teammate Nico Rosberg. At the other end of the order, Daniel Kvyat was once again underwhelmed in qualifying, down in 15th, eliminated alongside Nico Hülkenberg, who just missed out on the shootout. Q3 would once again see a Mercedes front row lockout, with Lewis Hamilton grabbing pole by 0.3 of a second. Valtteri Bottas took a solid third place, as Williams looked to have the pace over rivals Ferrari. So reading from 10th upwards, it's an all Toro Rosso row 5 with Verstappen in 10th and Carlos Sainz in 9th. Felipe Nasr took a solid 8th for Sauber with Daniel Ricciardo alongside him. Felipe Massa was 5th in front of Sebastian Vettel, with Valtteri Bottas getting the better of fellow compatriot Kimi Raikkonen, but it would be Lewis Hamilton who would take pole for the Japanese Grand Prix. So both Toro Rossos in the top 10 for today's Grand Prix, but as you can see, unlike the qualifying session and the practice session, we've actually got a bit of rain in the air. Light rain falling down here in Suzuka in Japan. A fairly dismal day, it has to be said, but that didn't stop Lewis Hamilton from getting pole position in qualifying. As you can see, starting on the intermediate tyres in yet another Mercedes front row lockout. There is Sergio Perez as well on the grid in his Force India, still yet to grab a point in this series and in this season so far. As you can see, there is a race strategy for if it does stay wet for the entirety of the race, but one thing I've learned when it comes to light rain and intermediate conditions on this game is that it never stays that way for the entirety of the Grand Prix, so I'll have to see if it gets wetter or of course drier, but nevertheless, 5 lights an hour on here in Japan, and we are underway. It seems like a pretty decent start. We're alongside Felipe Nasr off the line in the Sauber. Pretty decent launch, initial launch, but Nasr streaking away down towards turn 1, and we'll have to hang it around the outside of the Brazilian, as well as our teammate Max Verstappen, who's trying to sneak up the inside there, the Dutchman as well in the other Toro Rosso. Valtteri Bottas going wide there, going through turn 2, and Massa now off in the other Williams. Vettel getting massively sideways with contact with the other Williams. We make contact as well with Felipe Nasr going through. Now Max Verstappen trying to get around the outside of Carlos Sainz's teammate. Yellow flags are out, so someone's gone off behind Nico Hülkenberg, trying to capitalise on the two Toro Rossos battling in front of him, but Sainz does just about hold on there with a kick of oversteer going through Dunlop curve, but just does hold on to his P9. Felipe Nasr still in front of him, getting a little bit messy, it has to be said, with the two Williams and two Ferraris in 3rd to 6th place. Daniel Ricciardo watching it all unfold in front of him in 7th place in that Red Bull, but all of that shenanigans going through the first sector of this first lap has allowed the two Mercedes to streak away even more than they usually would do in one of these races, and they're already miles clear. You can see they're not even on the minimap. They're already halfway through Spoon Curve, and the rest of the field hasn't even got there yet. But nevertheless, halfway through this first lap, Carlos Sainz has managed to steer out of... what was I about to say? I don't even know what I was about to say just then. Stay out of trouble is what I was going to say. I don't know why I started with CL. Nevertheless, that's not the point. Going down this back straight here, and Sainz, as we said, this Renault power unit is struggling. It is struggling down this back straight down towards 130R. You could see Felipe Nasr streaking away, but Sainz a little bit more daring going through 130R than perhaps the guys around him. Nevertheless, on to lap 2, and Sainz appears to be a little bit quicker through 130R, so we'll have to see whether that's whether he can make that make that pay, if you like, later on in the race. And as you can see, he's trying to do it sooner rather than later, and up the inside he goes with Felipe Nasr, down into the final few corners through the chicane, and that is job done up into P8 past the Sauber there. Felipe Nasr, who had started to drop off the two Williams and Ferraris, as well as Daniel Ricciardo in front of him, so if Sainz wanted to stick with those guys, that's really a move he had to make. Going on to lap 4 now, and coming up towards 130R, Bottas and Vettel are battling in front of yellow flags out there. Bottas and Vettel coming back onto the track, so some sort of misdemeanor there, and Sainz got his braking zone all wrong and clobbered into the back of Sebastian Vettel. He's made it up the inside of Valtteri Bottas, but Bottas will try and get better traction out of the final corner and down that home straight, getting very, very close to the front left there of Carlos Sainz, who will now duck into the slipstream with the Williams in front of him. Daniel Ricciardo has managed to capitalise and get in front of both Vettel and Valtteri Bottas, or get back past both Vettel and Valtteri Bottas, but not entirely sure what happened there between the Ferrari and the Williams, maybe interlocking wheels going through 130R, but nevertheless, on to lap 5 here, and Carlos Sainz appears to be struggling, it has to be said, with tyre life and tyre grip already. This Toro Rosso has been pretty harsh on its tyres through the entire season so far, and Felipe Nasr has got a fantastic run down towards 130R, and the job is done before he even gets to the corner, but then he parks it on the apex going through that corner. Sainz, who's been easily going through 130R flat out there, being met with a pretty slow Felipe Nasr Sauber going through that corner. He does manage to make it back up the inside of the Brazilian going through the chicane, and job done onto lap 6 and up into P8. Nevertheless, it is the end of lap 6 now, and the tyres are completely gone, so the Spaniard is coming into the pit lane. He's being followed in there by Hülkenberg, I do believe it is, and in turn is following in, that is the Ferrari of Sebastian Vettel and also the Williams of Valtteri Bottas. So in comes Sainz then to stick on another set of the intermediate tyres. The weather conditions have not changed in the first 7 laps of this race. So far Sainz is down in P14. I think that is where he will rejoin. I think Max Verstappen also coming in on that lap in the other Toro Rosso, and he follows Valtteri Bottas out of the pit lane and is followed out of the pit lane by the Force India of Nico Hülkenberg, who will be looking to get back into the points after quite some time. It's been since Force India was in the points. Nevertheless, on to the next lap, and a few positions are made as a few more cars come into the pit lane onto, the next lap, or a few laps later, starting lap 10, and Sainz is moving back up to 11th, now 10th, now 9th, and a few more positions will hopefully be gained for him. Yes, Felipe Massa is passed. That's Daniel Ricciardo coming out of the pit lane as well, down towards turn 1. Can Sainz on the warmer tyres go right around the outside of the cold tyre? Daniel Ricciardo very, very close between himself and the Red Bull, but through he goes up into P7. Both the McLarens haven't pitted yet, so that will become a net P5, but some fantastic work there from Sainz to just drive around the outside there of the cold-tyred Daniel Ricciardo. Up into 6th place there goes Carlos Sainz as Jenson Button comes into the pit lane, and that is job done there on lap 11. Now moving on to lap 12, we've got yellow flags out down towards turn 1. 2 dots on the minimap are off the track. There's a car in the gravel. That's a Ferrari. It's Sebastian Vettel, and Daniel Kvyat as well is off. Daniel Kvyat was not in front of Carlos Sainz, so therefore must be a lap down, and Sebastian Vettel was in front of Carlos Sainz. That is another position gained for the young Spaniard. He's now up into 5th place, but Sebastian Vettel there clearly making contact with Daniel Kvyat, who was coming out of the pit lane maybe. Kvyat, who had a very poor qualifying, having a very poor race as well, and Sebastian Vettel there ending up backwards in the gravel trap. But talking of backwards, Sainz is travelling backwards at the minute, or at least it feels like it. Daniel Ricciardo going past him and up into 5th place as the Spaniard's tyres start to give up on him. Down towards 130R, and Felipe Massa is trying to make an extremely optimistic move up the inside. He decides against it in the end, as Sainz takes a little bit, well, quite a lot in fact, of the runoff area that wasn't there some years ago. That would have been a pretty catastrophic incident, actually, had we been racing in 2002 or a time like that. Nevertheless, we are racing in 2015, and that means that Sainz got away with it scot-free. Into the pit lane he comes again on the same lap as Valtteri Bottas in the Williams to be serviced once more onto lap 14, and again another set of intermediate tyres will be going on the car. But feels as if it's getting a little bit brighter in the skies at the moment, it has to be said, as these intermediate tyres go on. The track doesn't seem to be drying out, but it feels like the rain is dissipating slightly, and maybe there's a bit of a breakage in the clouds up above. Nevertheless, Marcus Ericsson coming through turn 1 and actually giving a bit of a bump there to Carlos Sainz as he came out of the pit lane, which I'm sure the young Spaniard was not too keen about. Nevertheless, the two McLarens are actually behind Marcus Ericsson, and they are doing an alternate strategy. They are trying to do a pit stop less than everyone else, hence it's quite important that Sainz came out in front of them. Nevertheless, as you can see, the DRS has been enabled. Now, as far as I'm aware, there are no cars on the slick tyres, which is usually the barometer as to whether DRS is enabled during a changeable conditions race. And the weather conditions certainly do not look as if they are too dry, it has to be said. So that's quite an interesting decision there made by Charlie Whiting. But nevertheless, Sergio Perez is in the process of retiring. You'll have seen him pull off to the side of the road as we were on board with Sainz, and unfortunately he is out of the race. It looked like somewhat of a suspension failure. His front left just randomly going very much inwards, changing direction halfway through 130R. So I'm not entirely sure what that was about, but he's out of the race. Nevertheless, as you can see, the tyres, according to our chief engineer, the tyres are in a crossover phase, or we are in a crossover phase for tyres. And as you can see, onto lap 19, Carlos Sainz has come into the pit lane and stuck on a set of prime tyres. So it is now time for the slicks to come out. But interestingly enough, people who were in front of Sainz or in his general vicinity, aka Nico Hülkenberg and Felipe Nasr behind him, and Daniel Ricciardo and Felipe Massa in front of him, decided to stay out for an extra lap. So we'll have to see how the tyres cope with the slight bit of greasiness and wetness that is on the track currently, or whether they get up to temperature. As you can see on the temperature gauge, they look as if they've got up to temperature fairly well. So this looks like a pretty decent decision from the Toro Rosso driver. As you can see, going into the final chicane at the end of the lap, ready to start lap 20. We'll see quite a few cars, I would imagine, into the pit lane as they trade their fairly worn intermediate tyres for a set of the slick tyres. Whether they go on to options or primes is, of course, up to them. But as you can see, Sainz is moving up into 5th place, which is where he was really net before anyway, but he's gained quite a bit of time in terms of just, seconds on Daniel Ricciardo and on Felipe Massa behind him. So he's up into 5th place where he was before the pit stop anyway, or in terms of net position. But he's gained a bit of time on Daniel Ricciardo. However, Daniel Ricciardo has come in for a set of option tyres, which means he's going to be significantly quicker than Carlos Sainz until the end of the race. And with 3 laps to go, the Australian has managed to catch the Toro Rosso driver. And now onto the back straight, onto lap 25, just 2 and a bit laps to go. Daniel Ricciardo is looking to make a move. Sainz's tyres are already starting to go off. And that's really the reason he put primes on, to make sure he could get to the end. Yet Daniel Ricciardo's options seem to be lasting the exact amount of time that Carlos Sainz's primes are, which is quite astonishing. Ricciardo, who couldn't make it through 130R on lap 25, tries again on lap 26, but is unable to do so. Into the chicane, Sainz is holding on as we're about to start the final lap then of this race, so it's do or die now for Daniel Ricciardo. Really poor exit out of the final corner for Carlos Sainz, and that is going to allow Daniel Ricciardo, who now has the access of DRS in these dry conditions, to breeze along the inside of the Spaniard going into turn 1. He's got the job done well before he even made it into the corner, but Sainz is not giving up on this one. He'll try and drive around the outside, but he doesn't have the mechanical grip there as they go through turn 1, and Daniel Ricciardo holds on to the position. As you can see, the tyres are starting to wear, well, they're worn already. They should not be this worn in comparison to Daniel Ricciardo's options, which are clearly still giving him a heck of a lot of life as he manages to breeze past Carlos Sainz down that home straight. Meantime, it is not over yet. Going through Dunlop Curve, Carlos Sainz is still just trying to make sure he's at least in the DRS range when they come up towards the final sort of segment of this lap, or that maybe he can make a move coming out of 130R where he's very strong in comparison to the AI cars. Felipe Massa is actually starting to charge him down as well in that Williams, having pitted a lap later, I suppose. Maybe that's the reason why Ricciardo and Massa aren't particularly struggling on their tyre wear. We're of course down to 19 runners after Sergio Perez retired early with that suspension failure, but Lewis Hamilton has won this Japanese Grand Prix. In the immediate future there for Carlos Sainz, it does not look as if he's going to be able to hang on to Daniel Ricciardo as they go through Spoon Curve. It looks as if he's got enough of a gap now to be able to hold on in front of Sainz even when they go through 130R. So now the Spaniard's immediate attention has to be turned to the car behind him, which is Felipe Massa in that Williams. It doesn't look, however, as if the Brazilian is going to be close enough through this quick left-hander and into the chicane to be able to make a move for 6th place. So it's going to be disappointment in the end for Sainz that he wasn't able to hold on to 5th place and lost that position on the final lap of the race. But it is an objective passed as they come towards the line now. Carlos Sainz will take 6th place, which is where the team expected him to finish, and he does hold on in front of Felipe Massa despite losing out to Ricciardo on that final lap of the race. Into Parc Fermé, and Carlos Sainz is pretty damn happy with that result. A pretty average result, it has to be said, as far as this series is concerned. 5th or 6th tends to be the average finishing position for Carlos Sainz in this series. A pretty poor race there for Sebastian Vettel, far away from his average finishing position, I'm sure you can imagine. They're down in 8th place after that incident with Danny Kvyat in the middle of the race. But after a pretty eventful and changeable condition race here in Japan, it is Lewis Hamilton who comes out on top from Nico Rosberg, the Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen, taking the final podium place in front of his fellow compatriot there, Valtteri Bottas, in 4th. Daniel Ricciardo passing Sainz on the final lap for 5th there, with Massa and Vettel in 7th and 8th, and Alonso and Button making their pit stop strategy work there in 9th and 10th for McLaren, making a pit stop less than everyone else, with Nico Hülkenberg, Marcus Ericsson and Felipe Nasr just missing out on points, and a fairly disappointing race for Max Verstappen there, down in 15th. But nevertheless, this is how that race, round number 14, although it's technically round number 13 given Singapore did not count, this is how the table, or the drivers and constructors table, is affected by that race. Lewis Hamilton is now out in front on 223 points in front of Nico Rosberg, who is behind him in 2nd place. They were even going into this Grand Prix. They were level on points after Italy, after that very astonishing race back in Monza, and Lewis Hamilton just extending a bit of a lead now over his teammate Kimi Raikkonen, doing likewise to his teammate Sebastian Vettel after the German's pretty poor race today in Japan. Daniel Ricciardo is in 5th place with Valtteri Bottas, Carlos Sainz behind him, though he is level on points with Felipe Massa there, those guys both on 87, I do believe. Then it's Max Verstappen and Felipe Nasr, the two youngsters, joint there in 9th place, the two rookies this season. Daniel Kvyat is in 11th place after another pretty disappointing race for the young Russian, with Jenson Button, Nico Hülkenberg, Fernando Alonso and Romain Grosjean rounding out the top 15, and Marcus Ericsson and Pastor Maldonado the only other point scorers. There was points on the table for Sergio Perez, but unfortunately he retired from the race. In terms of the Constructors' Championship, however, it is Mercedes who are well out in front by over 100 points in front of their nearest challenger being Ferrari in 2nd place. Williams are there in 3rd. They've been there pretty consistently all season, with Red Bull behind them in 4th, and their sister team Toro Rosso sitting there in 5th after pretty good points haul for Carlos Sainz so far this season. McLaren are up there in 6th place after a pretty poor start to the season. They've been hauling quite a few points in recent times. They're now clear of Sauber, who sits in 7th, with Force India in 8th and Lotus in 9th, and Manor down there in 10th. But nevertheless, I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Carlos Sainz career mode. A pretty decent race as far as things go. Changeable conditions always throw up a few surprises. A few decent battles with Daniel Ricciardo at the end, with Felipe Nasr at the start, and a few little overtakes as well in the middle of the race too. But nevertheless, if you did go on to enjoy, feel free to smash the likes button. 50 likes as always on this series would be massively appreciated, and subscribe if you are new around here for F1 and FIFA content in the future. But yeah, comment about enjoying the video if you enjoyed it that much as well. But nevertheless, it's been a pleasure ranting at you guys today. Have a good day, enjoy yourselves, and goodbye.